In this video, I want to teach you how healthy breathing can change your life by revolutionizing your health and mental space. Consider this question. What are the most fundamental actions you can take to support your long-term health? Most people will say things like eat well, exercise, drink water. Some people who are savvy might say something about sleep, but consider the cost of stopping each. If you stop exercising, that would be a huge detriment, but you'd still live for decades, assuming you didn't die according to something else. If you stopped eating, you wouldn't live that long, but you would live about a month. Even if you stop drinking water, you will survive for several days. But if you stop breathing, you'll be dead in 10 minutes. Oxygen is the most fundamental fuel for our bodies, and we should be intimately involved with the actions of breathing. Another way to say that is that if you don't ever pay attention to your breathing, how do you expect to have quality breathing over your entire lifetime? I'll give 4 guidelines to healthy breathing that are informed by James Nestor's book, Breath, and also according to my own experience. And I'll give the 4 guidelines in order of importance. The first guideline is breathe through your nose. Honestly, the other 3 guidelines are really guidelines, but this one is near absolute. We should be paying attention to our breath on the regular, and when we catch ourselves breathing through our mouth, we should stop and generally fix it to breathing through our nose. Now, I had heard of this before reading James Nestor's book, and the reasons that were always cited before were like humidifying the air and warming it up, but there are far better reasons. Consider the scope. The average human breathes about 20,000 times a day, or nearly 7.5 million times a year. In order to breathe healthfully year after year over the long haul, we really need to support the musculature behind breathing. And that's the main thing that I took away from James Nestor's book. Now, you can feel this difference. Go ahead and just take a comfortable seat with a long spine, whatever that looks like to you, and take a deep inhale. And then exhale. Then switch. If you breathe through your mouth, then breathe through your nose. And if you breathe through your nose, then breathe through your mouth. Inhale. And exhale. Did you notice that breathing through your nose creates more air pressure? That air pressure is training for the diaphragm and for all of the muscles around your breathing. And so breathing through your nose on the regular just keeps your breathing healthy. Now, of course, it's perfectly normal if sometimes you find yourself breathing through your mouth. Sometimes your nasal cavity is closed, sometimes you just can't get enough oxygen, and that's why we have that overflow valve that we can choose to breathe through our mouth. But generally, we should all be breathing through our nose. Guideline 2 is breathe with attention to cadence. Now, mostly I would just say you should pay attention to the rate of your breathing, but one of the easy ways to do that is to pay attention to your breath in a general way. I like to practice this with breath counting, and I'll leave a video linked in the corner if you're interested. One of the things that's interesting that comes out in the metadata of studying meditative people or prayerful people as well is that they settle into a breath cadence of about 5.5 breaths per minute. It's interesting that it settles to such a specific number for such a large number of people, but it just means when you're perfectly relaxed and totally at rest, your breath cadence should be somewhere in the ballpark of 5.5 breaths per minute. It also means if you want to calm yourself, you should slow your breath to about that rate, and it will allow you to calm the rest of your physiology down. During heavy physical activity, the most important thing is just to pay attention to the cadence of your breath. But running and cycling recently, I've been using 2 to 5, and I find it really useful. So you inhale for 2, like 2 steps or 2 pedal strokes, and then exhale for 5. And I find that it really helps me pay attention, and it's really difficult, which is good. It feels like training. Guideline number 3 is chewing and mewing. Now, humans used to chew a whole lot more, and this is not far back in our history. Like really pre-World War I, we were chewing on a lot of things in order to get food sources, and some of those were tough meat, but some were like bark and things like that, and we just used to chew a lot more than we do now. Obviously, one of the changes that comes as a result of that is a weaker jaw, but one of the things most people don't know is that that jaw actually wraps around the back of your skull, and you can feel it. If you just stop and flex your jaw, you can probably feel some muscles back here. So what goes together with having a weaker jaw is this whole muscle that wraps around our skull has gotten weaker, and as a result, over the last 100 years, we've have thinner skulls than we used to. That means that there's less room in our nasal cavity, and that's how chewing and mewing connects to breathing. And this is one of the reasons that our modern civilization is causing more breathing problems in our general population, including sleep apnea, which is much more common today than it ever has been. And one of the main reasons seems to be this smaller nasal cavity driving people to literally just stop breathing in the night. Now, of course, we do have agency, and we can combat these long-term changes in human populations. And the solution is the daily habits of chewing and mewing. I started trying to chew a whole lot more gum to see if that would service for me, and I didn't notice any noticeable change in my jawline. So I went ahead and bought one of these things that you've probably seen advertised. It's like a half of a rubber ball, and you just put it in your mouth and you chew on it. And this actually has made a noticeable difference, I think, in my jawline in the last year. So that's really the key to chewing, unless you're in to just eat a whole bunch of beef jerky or something like that, which might also work. Now, mewing is an interesting practice that supposedly can do the same thing. It was developed by some academic with the last name Mew, and it's kind of like if you say anything that ends with ing, like talking, and you notice in the back of your mouth that your tongue touches your soft palate. So keep your tongue against your soft palate and push the rest of your tongue against your palate, and then just keep pushing up. And that's called mewing. It's super weird. The modern studies actually already exist showing that in the long term, the daily practice of chewing and mewing can actually change the bone structure and grow the nasal cavity. The fourth guideline I'll give you is breathe weird sometimes. This is like do some weird breath practice or something that feels weird. Our respiratory system is in some ways very different, but in other ways not different than any other system of the body, and it needs regular exercise. These practices could be something as simple as breath counting that I talked about earlier, or it could be that 2 to 5 cadence that I was talking about when you're doing some sort of zone 2 activity. My personal favorite weird breathing practice is called Wim Hof breathing. But there are other great practices that I really enjoy also. One's called Tumo breathing and another one is Kapalabhati breathing. All are very cool practices that to me just feel really good in my body. But the main thing I would say is just breathe weird sometimes. Do some sort of breath practice. Take control of your breathing. Sometimes. So the 4 guidelines are breathe through your nose, breathe with attention to cadence, chewing and mewing, and breathe weird sometimes. If you follow these 4 guidelines, I promise you'll be breathing better in no time. And if you want to check out Wim Hof breathing, here it is. This is the Stoic Yogi, out.